In 1966, Thomas J.J. Altizer published The Gospel of Christian Atheism. Relatively unknown at the time, he could never have anticipated the furor that would erupt around the text. Together with Radical Theology and the Death of God, which he co-authored with William Hamilton, Richard Rubinstein's After Auschwitz, and Gabriel Vahanian's The Death of God, the Gospel of Christian Atheism would help inaugurate the movement known as the Death of God theology, or as Altizer preferred, Radical Theology. This wasn't Altizer's first book. He had earlier published two monographs, Oriental Mysticism and Biblical Eschatology, and Mercia Eliade and the Dialectic of the Sacred. As the second title indicates, these early works stood largely in the shadow of Eliade's school of the history of religions, which Altizer had studied while he was at Chicago. But the Gospel of Christian Atheism was a different animal altogether. Despite being his third publication and his fourth authored book, the Gospel of Christian Atheism exhibits a youthful brashness perfectly suited to the mid-60s countercultural revolution. And if the title wasn't enough to catch your attention, the quote he chose to have placed on the cover certainly would. The words of the esteemed theologian Robert McAfee Brown: "It is not a gospel, it is not Christian, and it is not atheism." The text itself bursts with a joyful exuberance. It is a text of the Nietzschean yes, as Altizer seeks to construct a radical Christianity posed to throw off the shackles of the church and traditional theism and dive headlong into the secular world. Here he radicalizes the Christian doctrine of the incarnation so far that orthodoxy can no longer contain its explosive consequences. And yet, looking back on it 55 years later, I have to admit the text can be a bit loosely argued, and its formulation somewhat imprecise. And I think Altizer would have agreed with that reading, for while he would quickly fade from the public spotlight, he never stopped writing, working for decades to sharpen and clarify his project. The brash existentialism of the Gospel of Christian Atheism would soon give way to a more rigorous ontology of the nothing in texts like The Self-Embodiment of God and Genesis and Apocalypse. And so in 2002, he published a sort of sequel to the Gospel of Christian Atheism, titled simply enough, The New Gospel of Christian Atheism. Situated in an ambiguous ground between a sequel and a second edition, this new gospel attempts to rethink the key themes of the earlier text: incarnation, apocalypse, dialectic, the death of God, but with a new context of the dawning 21st century. While some sections of the text are drawn straight out of the original word for word, others are significantly updated, and still others are completely new. Altizer, for example, here incorporates his thinking on nihilism and the nothing, developed throughout the 80s and 90s. He dialogues more extensively with Karl Barth, rehabilitating a radicalized notion of predestination, and where the first gospel ended with an existential wager, the second ends with a call. The call of something wholly and genuinely other, beyond even the otherness of traditional divine transcendence. Now, perhaps I'm biased. This was my first encounter with Tom's work, but I think that there is something truly profound happening in this text. And so for January, the inaugural month of the Radical Theology Seminar, we're going to be raffling off a copy of this brilliant theological investigation to one of our Patreon subscribers. All you have to do to enter is subscribe to the Radical Theology Seminar at any level. There you can participate in our January seminar, which will be a presentation by the eminent Altizer scholar, Lisa McCullough, and there you can participate in generating new theology fit for the 21st century. If you haven't already joined the conversation, don't miss out on this first opportunity by heading over to patreon.com/radicaltheology. We hope to see you there. The Radical Theology Seminar, for a world come of age.